My name is Pierre Hulsebus. Normally this time of year I'd be traveling in Europe. We have all sorts of fun things. This last year I was in Edinburgh, and we were out in Derbyshire this year. I took my lovely wife around Christmas time and had Christmas in the UK and met the Duke and Duchess. It was awesome. We went to Paris. I'm kind of an Anglophile. I have a Corgi and drive a Mini Cooper. So I live for my three wonderful children. I live in West Michigan, so I know this is a global call, so everybody's like, where's Michigan? So it's over here. And this was all great until COVID hit. So this is me now in the bunker, growing out my COVID beard. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can chime me on LinkedIn. I work with Ben and James and David Humphreys. I'm on the Global Black Belt team. I work in the field service, obviously, area, and have focused on manufacturing and oil and gas and energy customers over the last couple years. So I have a kind of a packed agenda here. What we wanted to do was really talk about resource schedule optimization. And I encourage all of you, we had some hands-on labs this last week that we did yesterday with product team and some deep dive stuff. I want to take it up a little higher today, though, and depending on time and questions, we can certainly get into more detail as needed. But we wanted to kind of set the stage with resource scheduling optimization and talk a little bit about kind of where the opportunity spaces are for it, how to position RSO and what it does and doesn't do. And that is often just as important to make sure that we're kind of installing systems that meet customer expectations, obviously, and that they're super happy. The way that it's set up right now, what we find is a lot of our folks like yourselves really don't have an opportunity often to have a hands-on experience with the application. Hopefully that will be changing with some changes that we're making to the platform this year. So we're going to go over the kind of common scenarios, talk about some of the kind of inner workings of the application, and then also speak a little bit about what is coming down the pipe with it and how things are working. So, and then feel free to ask questions along the way, and hopefully we'll have a great time today. So with that said, let's get right into it. So, within the system, there's three ways to schedule. There's way number one, which is our manual scheduling process. You see a resource requirement on the schedule board, and you just drag it onto the resource that you want it. You can also obviously invoke a booking experience, a guided, we call it broadly scheduling assistance, a guided booking experience where the parameters of the constraints and the preferences and the time and all of the things that are part of that resource requirement, all of the characteristics of that are passed over to a little bit of a, we call like the little filter system over here on this side. And all those variables are passed over there. And what they do is then that it filters out all the inappropriate resources and shows you resources that have time. So a dispatcher can make an intelligent decision looking at the appropriate sets of resources. And when you want to automate that at scale and do that kind of optimization around setting up all those appointments, instead of doing it manually, we can have an engine do that. And so we call that resource schedule optimization. And so what that does is that takes all of the characteristics of our resources. So we have our pool of people and trucks or whatever it is, resources that have all sorts of characteristics behind them, their skills, where they start their day, what their calendar is, where they're geolocated at. Then we take our resource requirements. Those are an entity that sits in field service under the work order. It's called a resource requirement, and that contains all the characteristics of those. So what time do we need to show up? Do we have a preferred resource that we need? Do we have somebody that has a specific skill? What is the priority of this? And we can then run our RSO engine, and it goes in the background and does all of its things, and it pulls all of that information from the input. It also takes two different other aspects of this, dimensions, to come up with an optimal schedule. We broadly refer to those as constraints. Constraints are things that are either on the persons or on the resources, like where do they start their day, or they are working between these working hours, what territory are those in? And then also there's other constraints that we can have on specific jobs. And then objectives. What is our maximum time that we're going to work? Are we going to honor locked bookings, or are we not going to honor locked bookings? Do we want to maximize the preferred resources and book people to 100% and then kind of start booking other people? So different strategies that different organizations have to have around the different types of jobs they come. So the engine evaluates all of those different combinations. If you can imagine building a chart of all the resources and every particular skill that they have, a matrix, and then every specific job that that individual resource could do, of all of the different, and then putting values to every single one of those. So let's say if I have one resource and I have 500 jobs, that would be a simple query, right? I would get 500 different travel distances between them. But then I have to take 500 and then I have to expolate that by another 500. So and then I add that another dimension, which is all the other resources. So let's say I have a team of 50 people and I've got 500 resources, 500 requirements. This gets into the billions of permutations. And so this is an impossible, physically impossible task for any team of people to do, to do it in the amount of time that this engine can do it. And so it just uses a tremendous amount of compute power. One of the awesome parts of being part of Microsoft is now, back when it was just field one, that sat on a specific computer. That sat on a couple machines inside the cloud. Now we're on Azure scale. And so this calculation for all of our customers runs and is spanned across the globe into a whole sets of machines. And it's a tremendous amount of compute power that goes into this to do this. And so what it does is it takes all of that and then it generates an optimal booking schedule per resource. It takes all of that input and all of this data and runs it through the engine and spits out the optimization booking schedule. And that is just for, we'll refer to this for our time today as a job. So it puts them into little schedules, little jobs that you run on a timed basis. We have customers that run this natively. We also have customers of ours that have external work order management systems. Let's say they have Maximo or they've made an investment in other enterprise asset management systems. Well, we can do this with them also. So we can integrate on the back end, just like we would with any kind of ERP system, to create the resource requirements and run the engine, and then the resources generate a bookable resource booking, and then we send that booking or work order back to the external system. So obviously, if you can do this at scale, the amount of ROI that's in this in terms of reducing the mileage on the road, if it's that's one of the goals, is often having more efficiency within the system. So there's a real ROI in terms of money saved by reducing travel time and time on the road. One of the statistics that I use often on this, we have customers that are out in Texas in the oil business, and if you've ever done Google or Bing Maps and hovered over the middle of Texas where all the oil fields are, it is out in the middle of nowhere, a tremendously desolate area, very open plains, the Wild West, as where cowboys used to go and stuff like that. And so now they only represent just a very small amount of the population. About 2% of the entire population of Texas lives in that area where we call the Permian Basin, which is out in Midland, Texas area. And out in that area, about 2% of the population, but that area accounts for 12% of the fatal car accidents and truck accidents in the state of Texas. And the reason for that is because the tremendous amount of travel that is done by all of the oil field service workers in their trucks and vans going out to service all those oil wells. And so just impacting the travel in an organization, these large organizations for their thousands of users by just 10% reduction in cost, not only reduces actual dollars and taxes that go with the mileage of, in the United States, generally we're about $1, depending on the vehicle, $1 to $2 per mile. These folks will often, it's not uncommon for an individual technician to drive for close to 1,000 miles in a week between all of these locations. And so just reducing that by, let's say, 10% saves them close to $200 of actual expense for a small technician just driving around his pickup truck out there. And then also gives that person back 10 or so hours worth of time, almost a whole nother day's worth of time then they can do more work. So it increases their efficiency by 20%. So it is a huge, and you can do all of that for $30 a month, basically, per resource. So that is one of the ROIs, is around reduction of travel time and improving the productivity of my technicians. That's in an internal area. When we think of this for our commercial space and when we're out servicing consumers, the big kind of KPIs that folks are looking at is trying to adjust and meet customer satisfaction, to try to say, this is when I'm going to show up and actually show up at that time, and increasing our customer retention and satisfaction, because we're able to have a really good interaction with our customer. So we see that in different areas, like out in Australia, we have what is out in Australia. It's kind of your visiting nurses that go out and visit elderly folks and kind of do their blood pressure checks and make sure that they're safe. And so we have several of these we call them in the U.S. Meals on Wheels programs, where they do the same thing, deliver lunch to elderly folks every day. And so these are the types of things where people are expected to be at a specific place at a specific time and relay that to those folks. So it's a lot about customer satisfaction. A lot of common scenarios, and we wanted to talk through some of the areas where we're great and where we're not so great. So where you think it initially seems like, well, RSO would be a fit for that, but it's not. So this is kind of the broad common set of scenarios that we have, whether it's routing technicians out there. We've gotten asked to do, hey, can you help us with routing trash pickups and furniture deliveries, pizza deliveries, help us, be Uber, static routes, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then also in facility routing or building or hyper local routing. So these are different scenarios that we get asked about all the time. And so some of them are great, some of them are not. Like some of them are like awesome opportunities, and others are like, run away from this. This is, by the time you get through this, it's not going to work. Well, we talked a little bit about that. So we have, so the way to kind of think about optimization as a whole is to think about it in three broad buckets. One is around transportation and logistics. That's where trucks go out and deliver things and whatnot. The other one is what we refer to often as static routes. Those are, and we'll drive into that a little. And the other is routing based around the skills and capabilities of individuals. So, currently this would be kind of that, let's say, continuum of things where you start considering where logistics and transportation focuses in on. So, like I said, one of the common things if this is the technical group, you guys get and gals get asked all the time, hey, we heard you guys can do scheduling and automate our trucks. Well, that'll be awesome. And so this is the way to think about how logistics actually works, where a sales order generates a sales process like furniture. We're going to deliver something. An inventory has to be picked and packed. We call that just pick and pack operations. It has to be put on a skid or, shrink wrapped or whatever, put in a box. During that process, we have to know what warehouse that's in, what bin location that is in, and the orders get staged up into a particular order based on the delivery kind of order. So you have to kind of reverse the from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. So you pack your truck. And then you have to kind of go to the yard and find a truck that is capable of capturing and carrying that load. A lot of times different trucks have different rules about them in terms of their size and their cube and how much weight goes into each one of those trucks. Sometimes even the skill set of, depending on where they're going, like, for example, in the city of New York. If you're driving a truck in the city, this is this way for most urban areas in the United States and Europe. I'm required by law to have a second driver with me in where I go. So I can't just be the driver. I also have somebody, because you got to have somebody get out of the truck and help you back in and set up cones and kind of be your safety eyes for you as you drive around the city. So you have a whole set of other characteristics that have to be considered. And then sometimes that load might be picked up and delivered by you, but in some cases a billing decision is made that, oh, this is more of a long haul, or that skid parts could really just go, we could just contract that out. We're just going to call another trucking company to come in. So cost decisions are made often. And the resources, not that they're not awesome. I myself was a Teamster in college, so I'm very familiar with this process, loading and driving trucks and high-lows. I love that job. And but that was it. You just have that one skill. So there's not a complex set of resource characteristics. And so this is one of those areas where when you start to have these kind of conversations around logistics, you have to kind of expand and do a little more discovery, because what people think about is that this is what logistics is. I kind of have my order and I pick it up or I deliver it and then we're done. But the reality of what it is that process that I just went through. Well, what happens if the guy isn't there to let you in his house? What do you do with the order then? There's much more complication in a logistics order process than our RSO engine can handle. And so if it's just figuring out what order something goes in, something as simple as that, right now, our system considers the capacity of a vehicle to be unlimited. It's not really a constraint for us. And so let's say I had 20 orders for the day, and the system, I only had one resource. It would put all 20 of those in a nice optimal way. And we said, those only took, let's say, 10 or 15 minutes to drop that off, it would give me my 20 orders. But you know, I'm not considering how big the product is that I'm putting inside the truck or how much that weighs. And so I can easily overload the truck. Other ones that are like this would be our, let's say, pizza deliveries or our trash deliveries, where you have the logistics of my truck after so many stops gets full. Then I have to go to another place after X amount of stops, and then I'm ready to go back to my route. And so it's those complications, that additional dimension around the vehicles themselves, that RSO is not a good fit for. So if you get involved in these conversations, this is the kind of perspective you should think about, that we can do some of that, but you need to also think, maybe not so great for us. Now, the other one is fixed routes. Fixed routes, a lot of, and this kind of starts back in the day, before computers, when we just had spreadsheets or just a piece of paper. And I was a proprietor, let's say, of a bread company, and I would give my drivers, pack their trucks full of bread, and say, you go work on the west side of town, and Bob, you go work on the east side of town. This is where a fixed route started. And often we refer to these primarily, often in a vernacular, at least in the United States, euphemistically as a bread run. And that's because that's how these are. So if you've ever worked as a retail clerk in a convenience store, at some time in the morning, the bread guy is going to show up and he's going to count your bread, and he's going to go out how much you sold yesterday. He's going to go out to his truck, and he is going to then fill that truck or your shelves up with more amounts of bread. And then he's going to tell you what your invoice is and give that to you. And that person typically is paid on commission based on how good he manages his route or territory. And so this has evolved over time to handle what we refer to commonly as fixed routes. Fixed routes are so, not only do we have that delivery component and load ordering, because I have to know that, you know, store number 2, they like the whole wheat bread. And when I was out to store number 8 yesterday, they were out of cheese bread. So I'm going to get them that kind of bread too. So I have to load my stuff in place. Some of the very fancy places like Federal Express, and in the United States we had UPS, DHL, whatever. Their routing engines actually optimize routes for turns, believe it or not. And this is always a fun fact. You can go out and look it up. There's some pretty fun little videos from our different folks on in that scenario. If I actually, in the United States, where we drive on the right side of the street, or the proper side of the street, as I would say, because I am from Michigan, where we invented the car. So if you turn right all the time, you will actually, as opposed to, you will, because you'll wait less time at the traffic light. If I always make a right-hand turn, I will actually get my route done faster than if I take a shorter route and include left-hand turns and right-hand turns. So you have some routing engines that take advantage of that. Skills aren't really considered in this, and as we're saying, kind of routes are assigned ahead of time. RSO is, you want to, those are questions we get often. So one of the things that, as a former recovering consultant myself, I like to challenge the model, because this is based on an old way of thinking. So first, the question is, if someone says, can you handle these types of routes? To a certain extent, we can. We don't have that right-hand, left-hand turn system. We don't have the capacity planning component like we had mentioned. But let's say I just have a technician that has to handle a specific route or a set of customers in a specific area, like a territory. So think of it now like a territory as opposed to a route. Can the system handle that? Yes, we can handle that. But we, as I mentioned, comparing to when somebody says, I want to handle fixed routes, there's a lot more that you need to ask to make sure that we can fit into that. So where this model, and this is why you want to kind of challenge this when this one comes up, is if I have route number 1 and route number 2, and they're in the same part of town. And so I've got my blue truck and my red truck. And then when something happens in route number 2 land, because I have this proprietary connection between route number 2 driver, that guy's supposed to handle it. Well, of course, that's not optimal. That's not optimal because I actually have a truck that's actually closer and can handle that quicker at a lower cost to doing the business. I would rather send the blue guy over there to handle it. So this is the main problem. I want to send these guys this way. And so this is one of the ways the RSO can help actually by saying we're not going to do routes anymore. We're going to dump weroutes. And people are like, what? We've used routes forever. And so this is when you get your book and you put your consultant hat on and you said, we're going to have a class on who moved my cheese, because I'm going to move your cheese today. I'm going to move your cheese. If we just put that in the system and let the blue guy instead of the red guy do it, we'd lower your cost and we would save you, X amount of time throughout the year. So that's usually where this kind of goes. And then they go, really? And then you try it out. And then lo and behold, you find out that you can do it. Now, with that said, sometimes when you move people's cheese, you need to have a little bit of the old cheese. They have to keep it. Or there are very particular reasons why fixed routes work for a company, and you can't change it. And there's actually some instances where it has to happen, and often it is because it's driven by customer need. A customer likes to see a specific technician. So in our elevator customers, for example, or our oil customers, you want to actually, even though there's not a skill defined for it, I still prefer certain resources to be consistently going out to the same customer. And so they get to know the customer and have a great customer experience. So sometimes the whole ROI calculation isn't really as important as the customer satisfaction component. So there is a way in the system to do it. You actually can just make a simple route be a characteristic of the system. And then you give those characteristics to resources. And so what you can do is I give resource 1, route number 1, and resource number 2, you get route number 2. And then my booking requirements on the actual service locations that we're going to go out to, we actually or part of each one of the work orders, I just associate that characteristic to the resource requirement. So I've got my little 4 work orders, different routes and different work orders. And so when I run RSO, what it will do is it will take my resources and will associate those route characteristics to the appropriate folks. And so I can actually do fixed routing if it's just this one characteristic. And then it would just literally optimize the time and obey all the rules. So I hope that helps underscore that some of those you can do, but again, where RSO focuses is on a couple other pieces. And so if these are missing from the requirements, then you might not, have the right opportunity, or this might not be the right fit for what you're doing. RSO focuses on preferred resources, skills, and availability. It's not a route optimization engine. It's a resource optimization engine. Let me say that again. This is an important distinction. It is a resource optimization, not a route optimization. We're slouching to add and incorporate more route optimization features that we'll talk about here in a little minute. But the primary and the awesome benefit of this system is that not only are we taking into account the resource locations, which is what a route optimization engine does really great at, but we add additional dimensions like availability and skills and preferences and priority We put that all together in variable job durations. We have service level agreements with our customers often that we have to fulfill. We have to understand that times to those customers are promised, and customers are waiting for me to show up at a specific exact time. And I've made those commitments. The other thing to think about is just like we did with talking about that route, the territory stuff, is that we have resources when we consider this that can do different types of jobs. And so that's where we RSO really begins to shine, and our solution really can do awesome. That these constraints and objectives and goals often then become drivers into the solution. So hopefully that helps us kind of think about what. Let me go back here. Let me just summarize this for a second here. So I'll stop on this one just to summarize. So just think about this from that kind of perspective, that not every organization or department or team or customer or opportunity that has trucks on the road, we're going to be the right fit for. There's other partners that we have. There's other options that are in the market that can do more sophisticated routing with all of some of those extra pieces that we talked about, like the left-hand turn stuff, or plugins to the ERP application that helps manage load management and some of the other components for that. So with that said, let's continue to some of the features within the actual application, and let's hope that those address some of the pieces that we got. Let's see, we've got about, what's our time? Let me just show my time check here. Let's see, what are we on? We've got 20 minutes. All right, so I'm gonna leave some time for questions. So I want to, let's see, we have this was Choose Your Own Adventure today. So a couple of things, I'm gonna start with this component here. And talk about some of the roadmap. Usually you close with the roadmap, but I'm going to stick this in right here and talk about some of the features that we have that we publicly announced and things that we're doing. So earlier this morning, if you were one of the earlier sessions, you saw a schedule board, an updated schedule board. And I don't have any slides for that, but on our roadmap, if you go to the roadmap slide, we don't have any screenshots of this that I can share right now, but we're embedding, the optimizer more deeply and more nicely, let's say, within the schedule board experience. And so from the schedule board, you right now have the ability to not only run and optimize a single resource, but you can actually run the optimizer within the current version of the schedule board. And you've seen the new enhancements to the schedule board, hopefully, and how it's a beautiful PCF kind of model, and it's just this gorgeous UI. And so we're, of course, going to enhance the scheduling RSO component to go within that. A couple other more tactical features that are coming in. One is enhanced skill matching in the RSO engine. So let me walk through this a little bit here. The skill matching component is one of those things where what can occur within a system, if I have two skills in this little demo org, where I have installations and I also do repairs. So David is only skilled for installations, but Chris and Edgar are skilled to do both installations and repair. And so what occurs within the system is that as the system generates different optimization goals and all that math that happens in the background, as I said, those kind of billion kind of calculations that the engine does, what it would do right now is that if I have a bunch of installation orders, it seemingly randomly will place those installation orders with any one of those folks, because all of them are capable of doing installation. And so if my constraint or my goal is to minimize travel, then it's going to do that. It's going to do that. David, just maybe this work order up here on the top, is far away from this work order over here. And so so even though David would be a good resource, could do these, he's too far away. And so the math just worked out. So those jobs worked out better there. But so the problem happens when a new work order comes in that might need to be scheduled within the system. So what we're doing now is we're adding this feature where the schedule goal will actually, when I rerun the resource engine with this new feature checked, what it'll do is it'll schedule the resources with the most matching skill level and schedule the resources with the least common skills. So you have this now as an option, or we'll have this as an option. And so if I said my installation, I want the least qualified person, I prefer them, I want the engine to prefer them, it would stack those jobs over to David. And because Chris has this repair skill capability, it would prefer David to do that single thing because David is considered the least skill or the least or less common skill. So that adds additional time then for them to respond on the schedule to a new work order that would come in that was for repair. So that's the behind the scenes of what's going on and why this is a cool function. So in a very small group like this, it adds basically another set of time for them to be able to handle one more work order. So this is just that kind of incremental improvement of 1 or 2 or 3, 5% on an organization, but at scale that adds up to real dollars within the organization. Now, the one that we have been and frankly have had in the hopper since the Field 1 days. So this is going on a request that we've had as a field service team to the product team, and they've been working on and noodling about this problem because, as you can imagine, historical and predictive travel adds a dimension to that big scheduling engine that is, the math on that is for mere mortals like myself that took Algebra 2, this is a astronomical calculation, believe it or not. This is only massive computers can solve the problem because it adds a variable of every particular, for every time slot that you could do something, you now have to go and query what that time would be. And so again, for my 500 different things, let's say I have a 24-hour period, so I have to add another dimension of 24 calculations for all 500. So it's 24 by 500 to add that to the matrix. So it's a huge amount of data, but they're doing it. So what we're going to do is add the ability to, because if you've ever been out to Seattle, you know that when we're all, we all know this. Going from the office to the airport at 2 in the morning is about 45 minutes. Take that trip in the afternoon and it's 2 hours, right? So we know that travel has a huge impact on, again, this is one of those drivers for performance, to be able to meet the commitment of the customer to say, hey, we're going to show up at 8:30 because that's what RSO does. But if I was able to actually have RSO calculate this a little better, because we're going to be there, at 9:30 because, it's a longer distance because of the time of day. So this helps the optimization engine out in a tremendous amount of ways. Obviously, it adds a higher degree of complexity, so it takes a little longer for the engine to run. But again, because we're on this hyperscale Azure system, we're able to have that. So in our little testing, everything is going to vary, of course, when you do this. So in our baseline, it added for 100 resources, 500 requirements, so 5 work orders a day, kind of a organization. We reduced the amount of latency in showing up on time. So we were we reduced that time more accurately by almost 10 minutes a time. And so there, obviously, if you can include this, you're going to get less bookings. because you're going to calculate midday travel in busy cities, which is what you want to do. The whole goal here is to be driven by customer satisfaction, and so that is a tremendous thing. So the travel time will go up, and the work time can go down, but it's much more realistic in terms of delivering on the promises that we have to our customers. So another one that we find to be important is in these scenarios where we have our working schedules, we need to travel what we call outside working hours. And so the way RSO works is right now, if your working hours for my team, everybody starts at 8 o'clock, it calculates the travel from wherever they're starting. Let's say these guys all start at their home in the day. If I say that, it's going to start them driving from their house at 8 o'clock. And so that first little component of time is actually has them leaving their house at 8. Well, most organizations don't do that. They want their guys to show up, or their gals to show up on site at 8 o'clock at their customer site. So they negotiate with their employees. Well, you're going to be commuting anyways, so you have some pre-work flexibility, and so that is what is going on in this particular situation. Is the organizations, we want that to be able to travel, start traveling at 7:45 or 7 o'clock to go to your appointment, so you show up on time. So what you can do is you'll be able to, at a resource level, right at the level of the resource, I can give a limit of travel time, this pre and post work hours travel time, to allow travel before or after. So you have this kind of ultimate flexibility here now to say, I need you to be home at 5, but you can drive in at 7:30. That's the kind of thing that we're doing. So you have these variables that you can now throw in, and so once you do this, folks are able to either leave early for that, and come home late. So one of the things we haven't done yet, and it's a common ask, is when you look at the RSO or the schedule board, it looks like this is blank time at the end of the day. Well, what that is supposed to be is that your time travel, the system calculates the time travel to where you end your day, back in the office or your home resource. So David here, his travel time to home is, would get him home at 5:30 or whenever his date ends. We just don't visualize that little line for travel. There's not one in there. Anyways, so that's some of the enhancements that we have planned for this next release, and you'll see this rolling out in our fall release. A couple other things that you're seeing is a enhanced analytical reports, and you'll begin to see more and more of this if you haven't picked up on a theme from the product team. They're now into some of the coolest stuff you've ever seen around analytics, right? And so is kind of looking at what the organization has been doing in the sales area around, the CRM and sales optimization stuff that we're doing in terms of predicting close rates and opportunities at risk, and all of that tremendous analytics. That same methodology and models are coming to our team now, and we're starting to see this tremendous uplift in one of the core assets that we have at Microsoft, which is our AI capabilities and AI engines. So you're just seeing the beginning of this wave of stuff, and I think Kyle spoke a little bit about that during the keynote. Some of the cool features that we have around. One, predictive travel is a great example here in this. We have predictive time for bookings that goes back historically and uses a machine learning engine. Analytic reports are also helpful for that. So these are fixed reports within the system that allow you to look at territories and individual schedules and RSO jobs that you run that what is the characteristics of those? So out of that scope of that territory or this particular optimization request, what was the technical results of that? What was my total travel time? And I can compare this, run to my simulated runs, so I can begin to have insight and, the ability to not just look at a schedule board, but give me the appropriate analytics that is driving my organization, so I can learn and do some things like capacity planning and whatnot. So with that, I'd love to open it up to any questions that we may have on this as we close out today.
I think Mr. Vollmer has been answering a lot of the questions.
Any questions at all?
Well, so I think, Pierre, I guess, I've helped get most of the questions here, but I would just pop in here real quick. If you need access to an RSO instance, anybody at Microsoft can request one from aka.ms/RSO demo. So if you have sales engagements or customer engagements or POCs or pilots or demos you want to do with that, definitely you can request, anybody at Microsoft can request one for you, and a partner is there. And Pierre, you want to talk a little bit about, I know you did a project with an oil field company around, using Esri as an alternative mapping for leased roads.
Yes.
You want to go ahead and talk about that real quick? Because a couple questions came up about that. So.
Sure, that's excellent. So one of the things that's super common in the enterprise space in different industries is they make investments in their own routing engine, or let's say geospatial provider is the term that Microsoft uses for that. And a kind of a hidden feature within the app, it's actually covered quite extensively thanks to our friend Dave Clark, who has documented a tremendous amount in our API around replacing the geospatial provider in Dynamics. And so you can do that. We just prefer, obviously, out of the box it's wired up to Bing, but you may replace that geospatial provider to inform the system of more accurate route calculations in time. So in some areas, frankly, our Bing maps might not be the most accurate or have really great travel information relative to the type of customers that they have. So like very common in the oil business, as I mentioned, all of those oil fields out there in the middle of Texas, oil fields and energy is very common in energy, whether they're wind farms or we're sending people to tops of mountains, and they have to go down dirt roads that aren't on public maps. And so one of our big oil customers they've all made giant investments in geospatial engines, and Esri is one of our partners for that. It's an Azure, it runs on Azure, so we love that. That's extra Azure revenue. But so we were able definitely to do that. Actually, work with our friends at Avanade, and our team worked together to provide that for one of our customers. So to replace the Bing Maps engine with Esri's engine to be able to do calculations on what they refer to as leased roads. And so those are private roads that they pay a farmer to say, you have or a rancher, one of our oil wells, its leases is sitting on your farm. We need to be able to drive there. So they negotiate a price for that leased road and that private road. And so they enter that into their mobile application or into that geospatial provider. So definitely something that we can do. And as Ben said, the demo, we can set up demos into your tenants. Again, just reach out to us. And what we'll do is they provision it for 15 days. So it's a 15-day trial. And that can get extended, if you have a longer period of time needed. So just engage with your Microsoft team and we can make that. It's a very easy request. It takes a couple days, though, so for it to happen, because an actual real person has to actually go in and do that. So the team that does that is over in, I think, the Philippines that works on that. So. Well, again, thank you, everybody, for your time today, and hopefully this was helpful for understanding the scope of what RSO can do. And if you have any questions or want to bounce ideas, this is or have any feedback for our team, we've made tremendous investments here, and you're going to just see this feature set within our tool just